The calendar reads May 16th, year 2167, but dates mean nothing anymore. The demon race has conquered the very last inch of human territory. The human world is gone, replaced by a charnel house of fire and bone. In the ruins of a once great city, beasts feast on the fallen as society burns to ash. The world hasn't just suffered, it has completely fallen. Among the jagged remains of a skyscraper, a lone figure is pinned against a broken pillar, a bloody monument to a lost cause. The fires of the apocalypse dance in the background, illuminating the total annihilation of civilization. Breath comes in ragged wet gasps. Sichen, the SSS lightning assassin, a man with spiky yellow hair and eyes that burn like dying stars, is humanity's last hope. But even a legend can bleed. He hangs there, gasping, huff, huff, blood pouring down his face and chest, his golden gaze fixed on the horror before him. An infinity symbol hangs from his neck, a cruel irony for a man at his end. 7 years ago, the nightmare began. Several demon kings suddenly descended upon this world without warning. Leading the charge was the monstrous demon kings Lanyu. With overwhelming power, they swiftly trampled the realm of man, turning cities into graveyards in a matter of months. Sichen remembers the silhouettes of the kings standing over the burning horizon, the beginning of the end. Demon King's Lanyu, a massive demon king with twisted horns and glowing red eyes, towers over the wreckage. He stares down at the broken assassin and sneers with a voice that drips with malice. To think you were called humanity's last hope. Your entire race is nothing but pathetic, fragile trash. To him, the struggle of millions was nothing more than a minor nuisance. The Demon King raises a massive clawed hand, red energy crackling around his fingertips like trapped lightning. He looks at the dying warrior and declares, "Now it's time to fulfill your only remaining purpose." The air grows heavy with the scent of ozone and death as he prepares the final blow. Behind him, the pillar where Sichen is pinned glows with reflected fire. A surge of crimson power erupts, a jagged terrifying manifestation of demonic energy. The force of it threatens to tear the very atmosphere apart. This isn't just an execution, it is a ritual of consumption. The red claws of energy flex, ready to strike and end the era of humanity forever. Demon King's Lanyu looms closer, his face twisted into a mask of hunger and greed. He hisses the command that seals Sichen's fate. Become him Y food, become him Y power. He intends to absorb the last SSS rank soul, feasting on the very essence of humanity's greatest warrior to fuel his own dark ascension. A blinding shockwave of white and red light tears through the battlefield. The sound is deafening, a roar of pure energy that shatters what little remains of the city. The collision of demonic power and a desperate rising counterforce creates a vortex of destruction that swallows everything in sight. This is the moment where the hunter becomes the hunted. But Sichen's soul is screaming louder than the explosion. No, my sister, my so emeredus. He sees their faces in the white light, the people he failed to protect. The red energy isn't just external anymore, it's the manifestation of his own agonizing grief and the blood he spilled for a losing war. The memory of them is the only thing keeping him from fatting. Images of the fallen flash before his eyes like shattered glass. My master, every single person closest to me. He sees the silhouettes of those he loves standing in a sea of blood. The realization hits him with a visceral force. All of them had their lives snatched away by you beasts. The grief transforms into a white-hot electric rage that surges through his broken veins. Lightning crackles across Sichen's teeth as he grits them in a terrifying snarl. He looks directly into the eyes of death and makes a final desperate vow. For their sake, even if it's the last thing I do, I will take you down to hell with me. He isn't fighting for survival anymore, he's fighting for a mutual grave. The infinity necklace glows with a blinding prismatic light. He pushes past the limits of human endurance, reaching for a power that demands his very life as fuel. The holographic message flares in the void of his mind. SSS Ultimate Skill Terminus Arc. A pillar of rainbow-colored lightning erupts from his body, soaring into the heavens and turning the night sky into a day of judgment. Sichen stands at the center, a silhouette of pure destructive light. The world turns a blinding yellow as the Terminus Arc expands. Demon King's Lanyu, once the arrogant predator, is now just a shadow caught in the blast. The sheer magnitude of the skill dwarfs the Demon King, his soldiers disintegrating instantly in the peripheral lightning strikes. The shock on the demon's face is the last thing Sichen sees through the glare. The Demon King's eyes widen in genuine terror as the light binds him. What is this? I can't move, he screams, his voice cracking with panic. The SSS skill isn't just damaging him, it's locking his very existence in place, pinning the master of demons to the same fate he tried to inflict. The arrogance is gone, replaced by the realization that even trash can burn with the heat of a star. Si Chen's body begins to fragment, his skin cracking like porcelain as the lightning consumes him from the inside out. He looks strangely at peace, his golden eyes wide and glassy reflecting the end he chose. He isn't screaming, he's simply fading into the light, his sacrifice nearly complete. The infinity symbol on his chest is the last part of him to glow. In his final moments, the shards of his memory surround him. He sees a vision of his sister, her face streaked with blood and tears as he held her in the rain. "Sister," he whispers in the silence of his mind. The memory is painful, a sharp fragment of the life he couldn't save, now shattering along with his physical form. Another shard drifts by, showing the back of the man who taught him everything. Master, the figure is distant, a silhouette of strength that Si Chen strove to emulate. The loss of his mentor was a wound that never healed, a debt he is finally paying back with his own soul. The darkness of the void begins to swallow the edges of the memory. The most painful shard appears, a family photo from a time of peace, showing his parents and a younger, happier sister. "Mom, Dad," he reaches out for them, but they are just echoes of a world that no longer exists. They are the faces of the humanity he failed, the ghosts that have haunted his every step since the invasion began. The fragments continue to fall away into the blackness. He thinks to them, "We'll see each other soon." But the thought is poisoned by a bitter regret that tastes like ash in his mouth. "It's a pity I wasn't strong enough." Even at the very end, the guilt of his perceived weakness is the heaviest burden he carries. As his consciousness dissolves into white light, one final agonizing thought echoes through his mind. If only I had been a little bit stronger. If he had just had a bit more power, perhaps the cities wouldn't have burned. Perhaps his sister would still be laughing, and perhaps the world wouldn't be ending in this blinding flash of desperate magic. Demon King's Lanyu is disintegrating, his dark armor peeling away like burnt paper. Even in his death throes, his hatred burns. "You lowly, inferior race, to think you could AC?" He can't even finish the sentence before the terminus arc obliterates his physical form. The conqueror of worlds is reduced to sparks in the wind by a man he called trash. The shards of reality shatter completely, leaving only white space and a lingering regret. If only I could go back to that time and discover that demon lair sooner. Si Chen's mind clings to the turning points, the moments where the tide could have been turned if he had known then what he knows now. The missed opportunities haunt his final descent into the abyss. The final vision is a city drowning in prismatic light, a beautiful and terrible end to a decade of war. If only I could have stopped the very first Demon King, the realization strikes with visceral force. His entire struggle was merely a reaction, not a prevention. If he had only changed the beginning, this hell would never have existed. With that final impossible wish, the SSS Lightning Assassin begins to vanish from the dying world of 2167. But even as the light swallows him, a lingering echo of regret refuses to be silenced. The blinding radiance of the terminus arc fades into a dull, haunting void. As consciousness slips away, a final agonizing regret echoes through the silence. Inside his mind, Si Chen thought, "Then I wouldn't have." The fragments of his memory shatter like glass, drifting into the darkness. He felt the weight of his failures pressing down one last time. He continued the thought, lost everything so early, and prepared for the end. But death did not take him. Instead, a blurry shape slowly drifted into focus, a simple ceiling light glowing with a soft, warm hue that felt foreign after years of living in a world of blood and fire. The darkness was gone, replaced by the mundane reality of an indoor room. Si Chen's eyes snapped open, his vision clear and sharp. The red glow of the battlefield was gone, replaced by the clean, quiet atmosphere of a room bathed in sunlight. There was no scent of ozone or rotting flesh, only the faint, sterile smell of a hospital. He was lying flat on a thin mattress, his body feeling oddly light and whole. There were no jagged wounds, no broken bones, and no Demon King looming over him. He stared at the ceiling in disbelief, his mind struggling to bridge the gap between the apocalypse and this sudden peace. He sat up abruptly, his hands trembling as he checked his own body. The bandage on his nose felt real, but the absence of his massive scars was impossible. Gasping for air, he whispered, I'm not dead," and gripped the sheets, his heart racing with a mix of terror and hope. Si Chen scanned the room, his eyes darting from the medical curtains to the simple office desk and chair nearby. It was an infirmary, clean, quiet, and completely untouched by war. In his confusion, he asked the empty room, "Where is this?" As if the walls might provide an answer. He stood up and walked toward the window, his movements fluid and painless. The sunlight felt warm against his skin, a sensation he hadn't truly felt in years. He peered out, his eyes widening as he prepared to see the ruins of the world once more. But outside, there were no monsters. He looked down from the school infirmary hospital wing and saw a campus teeming with life. Students walked in groups, laughing and carrying books, completely oblivious to the doom that had once claimed them all. The world was green, vibrant, and alive. Sichin stared in total shock, gasping at the impossibility of the scene. His breath hitched as he leaned against the window frame, his eyes scanning the faces of the living. Inside his mind, he questioned everything he knew. Wasn't the world already destroyed? All these people, where did they all come from? It was a miracle that felt like a hallucination. He stepped away from the window and found a mirror on the wall, splashing cold water on his face to ground himself. After a long while, I finally accepted the reality. The face staring back at him was younger, softer, and devoid of the 1,000-yard stare of a dying soldier. It was the face of a student, not a martyr. The truth settled into his mind with the weight of a mountain. He realized, I have returned 10 years into the past to my university days. The year was no longer 2167. He had regressed to a time when the word demon was still just a myth. He stared at his youthful reflection, his mind already beginning to calculate the possibilities. Suddenly, a sharp digital ringing sound filled his ears. A holographic waveform shimmered in the air before him, pooling with an eerie white light. It wasn't a hallucination, it was an interface, one that felt intimately connected to his very soul. It crackled with energy, signaling the awakening of something dormant. A system window materialized in the air, its text crisp and clear. A holographic screen flashed, power of gluttony, integration complete finished. Sichin watched the message linger, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He thought, I've returned to before it all began. This time he wasn't alone, he had brought a piece of the future back with him. He pulled out a nearby smartphone and checked the display. The screen confirmed his suspicions, May 16, 2157. The time was 1615, it was the exact day and month he had died in his previous life, but 10 years earlier. The cycle had broken and a new timeline had begun. Sichin stood before the mirror, the glowing system interface reflected in the glass alongside his youthful face. He reaffirmed the impossible truth to himself. Came back 10 years in the past, May 16, 2157. The sunlight through the window felt like a blessing he didn't deserve, but one he would use to his advantage. His golden eyes narrowed, flickering with a faint, dangerous red light as his killer instincts resurfaced. He realized the strategic importance of this date. This is 3 years before the descent of Demon Kings. He had 3 years to prepare, 3 years to gather strength, and 3 years to ensure that history did not repeat itself. A dark vision of the future flashed through his mind, massive purple tentacles and demonic eyes looming over a helpless city. 3 years from now in 2160, the first Demon King, Wrath, will descend. He remembered the screams and the smell of burning rubber as the world began its slow descent into hell. The vision shifted to the shadows of monstrous beings emerging from a red void. It was Wrath who opened the gates of hell. And because of him, the other demon kings followed into the human world one by one. That was the starting point. Sichin's fists clenched at his sides as the memories of the invasion flooded back. He saw the burning ruins and the silhouettes of demons standing over the corpses of humanity, of total destruction. And the reason, I lost everything. The loss of his sister, his master, and his comrades burned in his chest like an unquenchable flame. This time he wouldn't just be a survivor, he would be the executioner. He looked down at his palms, feeling the youthful blood coursing through them. A fierce predatory grin touched his lips. But now, I am back. The despair of the previous life was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. He had been given a second chance and he wouldn't waste a single second. His eyes blazed with a crimson intensity as he formulated his plan. As long as I defeat the first one to appear, Wrath, I can prevent the gates of hell from ever opening. I have a chance to change everything. The mission was clear. Kill the first Demon King and save the world before the war even starts. The system message remained floating in his vision, a constant reminder of the gift he had received. Power of gluttony, integration complete, finished. As the initial shock began to fade, a new curiosity took hold. Inside his mind, he thought, come to think of it. Standing in the silence of the infirmary, Sichin found himself unable to pull his eyes away from the shimmering text. This power of gluttony, it was a name he had never encountered in his previous life, yet the interface had been tethered to his vision since the moment he woke. Inside his mind, he questioned, what is this power of gluttony interface? It's been floating in front of me ever since I opened my eyes. It was an unknown variable, a mysterious force that defied his memories of the future. Curiosity outweighed caution as he reached out, his fingers brushing against the flickering waves of light. The digital strings vibrated at his touch, humming with a raw predatory energy that felt both alien and exhilarating. It was as if the system was waiting for his command to reveal its secrets. As he focused his intent, the screen flickered, preparing to display the impossible truth of his new existence. Sikhen stared at the holographic screen floating in the air, his eyes wide with disbelief. A translucent window displayed a set of numbers that defied logic. He gasped as he realized what he was looking at, a status bar from his own past, yet fundamentally changed. Inside his mind, he thought, as the weight of the discovery began to sink in. He leaned in closer to examine the flickering data. The name on the screen was Xiaozhou, his identity within this mysterious system. But it was the attributes that were truly terrifying. Strength, stamina, elemental power, speed, luck, and spirit were all set to a perfect 100. He questioned his reality, thinking, what is all this game-like data? Are these my current attributes? For a level 1, these stats were nothing short of godlike. He looked down at his youthful hands, then back to the mirror, his red eyes reflecting a cold, sharp intelligence that didn't belong to a university student. He calculated his situation, thinking, I've never seen anything like this before. In the past, I always fought using my awakened power. This was something entirely different, a variable that could flip the world on its head. Memories of the old world's hierarchy flashed through his mind, represented by the glowing icons of different classes. The Star Mage, the Nucleus Warrior, and the Lightning Assassin. He recalled the harsh reality of their society. A thought echoed in his head, only 1 in 10,000 people in this world can become an awakener. In a world of billions, they were the elite, the gods among men. He peered through the window at the sprawling campus, the sun setting behind the modern architecture of his youth. This was the National Awakener University, a place where the future was decided. He mused, and the school I'm currently attending is one that only recruits potential awakeners. It was a breeding ground for the powerful and a slaughterhouse for the weak. A dark memory of his previous life surfaced, a vision of himself on his knees, surrounded by the shadows of those who once looked down on him. He felt the phantom pain of every kick and insult. He lamented, but unfortunately in my previous life, I failed to awaken during my university years. For 4 whole years, I stayed at the very bottom of the food chain. Anyone could just walk up and give me a kick. The bitterness of his past failure burned in his throat. He rubbed his chin, his expression shifting into a weary, cynical scowl. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on him. He muttered to himself, is this why I woke up in the infirmary? It seemed that even regressing 10 years hadn't saved him from the humiliation he had endured as a failed student. But then the system glitched and a new interface appeared, a card shimmering with static. Si Chen's eyes narrowed as he focused on the image of a shadowed figure wreathed in electricity. He whispered, HM, as he recognized the silhouette. It was a fragment of the power he had spent a lifetime perfecting. The details of the card crystallized into an archive file. It was the Lightning Assassin, a class of pure lethality. The screen detailed his old skills, Lightning God which could boost movement speed tenfold and Lightning Blade, a condensed arc of paralyzing power. He stared at the text, his heart thumping thinking a lightning-type assassin. It was exactly what he had been before his death. A mental image of his true self flashed before him. A master of storms standing amidst the lightning. He could feel the phantom sensation of electricity dancing across his skin once more. He wondered, isn't this my class from my previous life? I can vaguely feel a surge of power flowing through my body. Could it be that the strength from my past life was inherited along with me? It was the only logical explanation for his impossible stats. The realization made his blood boil with a mixture of excitement and cold fury. If he already possessed the power of an SSS rank hunter, then the 3 years before the invasion would no longer be about survival. They would be about absolute dominance. He asked himself, did I awaken early? The light of the interface bathed his face in an eerie golden glow. He didn't hesitate. He willed the system to act, watching as a loading bar filled with a sharp white light. A notification flashed, switching class. Inside his head, he decided, let's test this power. He could feel the latent energy in his veins beginning to churn, waiting for the command to erupt. A sharp snap echoed in the room, the sound of the world's laws bending to his will. Si Chen's gaze shifted toward the door. His senses suddenly heightened to a degree that was almost overwhelming. He could hear footsteps in the hallway, the heartbeat of a person approaching, and the faint hum of power from nearby electronics. The door creaked open and a young man with brown hair and large round glasses stepped inside, his face pale with concern. A status bar appeared above his head, Ma Long, E-rank flower chanter. The sight of him made Si Chen's heart tighten. Ma Long stared at his roommate, his voice cracking as he cried out, in pure surprise. Ma Long rushed to Si Chen's side, his hands fluttering nervously as he checked for injuries. "Hey buddy, you're awake, is your body okay now?" he asked, his voice full of genuine frantic worry. Si Chen stood there frozen as the system window remained hovering between them. He thought, "Is your body okay now?" while carefully observing his friend. Si Chen looked at the holographic card of the Devourer and then back at Ma Long, who seemed completely unaware of the digital waves around them. He confirmed his theory, thinking, "As I thought. No one else can see this interface." Forced his expression into a calm mask and replied simply, "I'm fine now." But Ma Long wasn't easily convinced. He poked and prodded at Si Chen, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Hey, all your injuries are gone," he shouted, his voice echoing in the small room. "You took such a heavy beating just yesterday. Are you recovering even faster than an awakener like me?" The sheer impossibility of Si Chen's recovery was enough to leave the young chanter reeling. Si Chen looked at his friend, a wave of bittersweet nostalgia washing over him. "This is my university roommate, Ma Long." To anyone else, he was just a low-ranked student. But to Si Chen, he was a ghost from a world that had been erased. The bandage on Ma Long's cheek was a stark reminder of the harsh world they inhabited. He watched Ma Long adjust his glasses, a flurry of thoughts crossing his mind. Although he awakened during college, he was a total bottom tier. In my past life, he was tragically killed on the third day of the Demon King's descent. The memory of his friend's death was a cold, sharp blade in his soul. But now he is truly standing right in front of my eyes. Ma Long tilted his head, wondering, "Why do I feel like you've actually gotten stronger? Is it just my imagination?" The setting sun cast long shadows across Si Chen's face as he looked at his friend. A small, genuine smile almost touched his lips. "Only at this moment do I truly feel it. I have really come back." The reality of his regression was no longer a theoretical concept. It was a physical weight, a second chance to save the only person who had stayed by his side. Ma Long suddenly grabbed Si Chen by the shoulders, his panic returning. "That's right. Tomorrow is the rank test," he blurted out, shaking his friend with frantic energy. "Since you're okay now, let's get back and prepare." The urgency in his voice reminded Si Chen that life at the university was moving forward, whether he was ready or not. Ma Long continued to drag him toward the door, his voice echoing down the hallway. "Even if you haven't awakened yet, it's still crucial for your graduation evaluation," he yelled, his legs moving in a blur as he urged Si Chen to hurry. For Ma Long, the test was the most important thing in the world. For Si Chen, it was merely the first step in a much larger war. They stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking the vast campus under the golden glow of twilight. The National Awakina University was a sprawling complex of glass and steel, a monument to human potential. Below them, the sports fields were alive with the sounds of training and competition, a scene of peaceful preparation before the coming storm. The campus teemed with a vibrant energy of youth and untapped potential. Everywhere Si Chen looked, students were manifesting their powers in small, mundane ways. A girl conjured a swirling ball of purple energy in her palm, while others laughed and talked as if they had all the time in the world. The sounds of laughter echoed across the plaza, a carefree melody that Si Chen knew would eventually be drowned out by the screams of the dying. On the soccer field, a student sprinted with bursts of fire erupting from his shoes, while another launched a ball with superhuman force. They were merely playing with the very powers that would later be used in a desperate struggle for survival. Si Chen watched them, a cold, predatory light in his eyes, as he followed Ma Long into the heart of the crowd. He was the only one who knew that this peace was a fragile lie, and he was the only one with the power to keep it from being shattered. Si Chen walked with Ma Long through the crowded campus, the setting sun casting long, golden shadows across the pavement. He looked at the groups of students, their faces bright with life and petty concerns, and felt a strange, hollow sensation in his chest. He whispered to himself, "It's been a long time since I've seen so many living people." Beside him, Ma Long shivered, his round glasses reflecting the sunset as he asked in a shaky voice, "You, what kind of scary things are you saying?" Ma Long adjusted the bandage on his cheek, his expression filled with a mix of exhaustion and genuine concern. He looked up at Si Chen, his eyes pleading for a return to normalcy. "Buddy, let's just walk around the playground," he suggested, hoping a bit of fresh air would clear whatever dark thoughts were clouding his friend's mind. The fallen leaves swirled around Si Chen's feet as he continued to walk, his gaze distant. The peaceful university campus was a stark contrast to the graveyard he had just escaped. A grim thought settled in his mind: I once lost everything completely. The memory of the blood-soaked horizon felt more real than the stone buildings surrounding him. A dark vision of the apocalypse flickered in his mind, showing his past self standing amidst the ash and crumbling skyscrapers of a dead world. He knew the timeline of the coming disaster better than anyone. He realized, if I do nothing, that desperate future will soon arrive again. The weight of his knowledge was a heavy chain around his soul. He stopped walking, his red eyes blazing with a cold, predatory intensity that made the air around him feel heavy. He made a silent vow to himself. I must take action immediately. I have to increase my level as fast as possible. Survival was no longer an option. He needed to become the apex predator before the true monsters arrived. He recalled the basic laws of this era, visions of armored warriors standing over the corpses of massive beasts. In this era, there is only one way for an Awakina to level up: by killing monsters in the demon lairs. The raw primal nature of power in this world meant that blood was the only currency that mattered. His thoughts turned to the political landscape, a vision of do not cross tape sealing off a glowing purple rift. But almost all demon lairs are monopolized by the great guilds. Outsiders have zero chance to level up. He looked back at his own flickering status window and wondered if these are my current stats. Then how strong am I compared to other Awakinas and monsters? The system window displayed his name, Si Chen, and his perfect level 1 stats. He mentally reviewed the world's hierarchy. To distinguish power levels, the government has classified Awakinas and monsters into ranks. From highest to lowest, they are S, A, B, C, D, and E. He knew where he once stood, and he knew where he was now. He watched the other students passing by, seeing their low-ranked energy signatures through his hunter's eyes. Most students at the university are stuck at E rank. Only a few geniuses or those with guild backing can reach D rank. They were all small fish in a very dangerous pond, completely unaware of the sharks already swimming among them. The level 1 indicator on his status screen glowed with an eerie, steady light. He looked at the athletic track stretching out before them, although I can estimate based on experience. I wonder what rank I get if I took the test. The upcoming graduation evaluation was the perfect opportunity to test his newfound potential. Si Chen glanced sideways at Ma Long, who was still looking around with a nervous, confused expression. Indefinitely stronger than him, he thought, a cold calculation running through his mind. Ma Long noticed the stare and tilted his head, a literal question mark appearing over his head in his confusion. The peace was shattered in an instant. A basketball thrown with malicious force tore through the air and struck Ma Long directly in the face. The impact was sickening, the ball bouncing away as Ma Long's head snapped back. Si Chen watched with a sudden icy focus, the world slowing down to a crawl as his killer instincts flared. Ma Long collapsed onto the hard pavement, clutching his face as blood began to trickle from his nose. His glasses were knocked askew and a pained "ugh" escaped his lips. He curled into a ball, the sudden violence leaving him reeling in the dirt. Si Chen's gaze drifted toward the source of the attack. A group of 4 students sat on the nearby stairs, their postures arrogant and relaxed. They were the apex predators of the campus hierarchy. The lead bully, a muscular man in a dark tank top, leaned forward with a cruel smirk. "Isn't that Si Chen and Ma Long?" he called out, his voice full of mock friendliness. K letter 1 EBB, B letter 1 EFT, and letter 1 EA1T, Kong Turn, unnamed bully, looked down at them with eyes full of disdain, a dog tag dangling from his neck. He adjusted his position, his massive shoulders blocking the light. "You guys recovered pretty fast," he commented, his voice a low, threatening rumble that carried across the court. To him, they were just playthings. Ma Long looked up, his face pale and his eyes wide with terror as he recognized their attackers. He whispered frantically to Si Chen, his voice trembling. "Real bad luck, we actually ran into him." The fear radiating from him was palpable, the memory of previous beatings fresh in his mind. Si Chen stood his ground, his back to the camera as he looked up at the bullies. He didn't move to help Ma Long up, nor did he flinch. He simply observed them, his red eyes analyzing their stats and their weak points with a cold military precision. The sun set behind the buildings, casting the campus into deep orange shadows. The lead bully chuckled, glancing back at his cohorts as if sharing a private joke. "I told you these 2 kids were tough," he boasted, his smirk widening. He was enjoying the spectacle, the feeling of absolute power he held over the trash of the university. Behind him, another student with white hair stood with arms crossed, watching silently. The lead bully leaned forward, his expression turning cold and demanding. "You clearly knew I was playing ball here. Why didn't you think to bring 2 crates of drinks?" He expected immediate submission, the same way he always had. To him, the world was a simple place where the strong took whatever they wanted. Ma Long scrambled to his feet, bowing his head in a desperate habitual apology. He was shivering with fear, his voice high and frantic. "Sorry, I'll go buy them right now." He was ready to flee, to do anything to avoid another confrontation. He turned to leave, his spirit completely broken by the bully's presence. But Si Chen's hand shot out, catching Ma Long's shoulder and stopping him in his tracks. He stared directly at the bullies, his red eyes reflecting a dangerous lethal calm. He spoke with a voice that was as sharp as a razor. "You aren't the one at fault. The ones who should be saying sorry are them." The air on the court suddenly grew cold as if the first frost of winter had arrived early. Under the harsh afternoon sun, a group of students sat lounging on the concrete steps, their presence radiating a subtle threat. One of them pointed toward the approaching duo and called out, "Yo, isn't that Si Chen and Ma Long?" The casual tone of his voice masked the predatory intent beneath it. Gong Chang leaned back with an arrogant smirk, his muscular frame draped in a dark tank top. He eyed the 2 newcomers with a condescending gaze and remarked, "You guys recovered fast." To him, they were nothing more than convenient outlets for his boredom. Ma Long froze, sweat beading on his forehead beneath his messy brown hair. The bandages on his face were a testament to their previous encounters. He thought in a panic, "Just my luck," ran into him again. The fear in his wide eyes was palpable. Standing beside his trembling friend, Si Chen remained eerily calm. His gaze was fixed on the bullies above, his posture relaxed yet ready. He didn't flinch, even as the tension in the air thickened to a suffocating degree. Gong Chung chuckled, turning his head slightly to boast to his companions. "I told you these 2 kids can take a beating," he bragged, his voice dripping with sadistic pride. He saw their resilience not as strength, but as a reason to hit them harder next time. As Si Chen stared at his tormentor, something shifted within him. His dark eyes began to glow with a faint, ominous red light. He whispered to himself, "It's this guy." Suddenly, like an opening floodgate, some memories from the past welled up cold and bitter. The memory hit like a physical blow. The sound of rushing water and frantic gasping echoed in his mind. He could feel the cold ceramic of the sink and the suffocating pressure of being held down. Bubbles of air escaped as he struggled to breathe. In the flashback, the scene in the men's restroom was brutal. Gong Chang had forced Si Chen's head into a sink full of water, the sounds of gu, lu filling the small space. The other bullies stood around, their faces twisted into masks of cruel amusement as they watched him struggle. From the doorway, Ma Long stood horrified, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and desperate anger. You guys stop it right now," he screamed, reaching out as if to pull them away from his friend. Gong Chang didn't even look up, his grip tightening on the back of Si Chen's neck. "Why stop? I'm helping him," he mocked. He laughed as the water splashed everywhere, completely indifferent to the suffering he was causing. "He hasn't awakened yet even now." Gong Chang shouted over the sound of the struggle. "Shouldn't we stimulate him a bit?" The cruelty was deliberate, a calculated effort to humiliate someone they deemed inferior under the guise of encouragement. The restroom erupted in raucous laughter. The bullies found the sight of a drowning student hilarious, their egos fed by the absolute power they held over him. Their cackles echoed against the tiled walls, sharp and jagged. Eventually, Gong Chang pulled him out and let him drop to the floor. "He fainted just like that," he remarked with a dismissive wave. Let's go, it's boring now." As they swaggered out, leaving the dripping boy behind, Ma Long rushed to his side, calling out his name in a panic. Ma Long knelt by the unconscious Si Chen, his hands shaking as he tried to help. "Si Chen, are you okay?" he pleaded. The sight of his friend broken and wet on the bathroom floor was a scar that wouldn't easily heal. Water dripped from Si Chen's dark hair as he slowly regained consciousness, his vision blurred. A single thought consumed his mind, born of pure, unadulterated resentment. Why do they never let us go? It was a question with no answer, only a deepening darkness. The realization settled into his bones like lead. Pure malice doesn't just exist in the demon lair. It isn't just something found in the monsters of the abyss. One of the bullies nearby glanced over, confused by the shift in the air, and asked, "Did he just speak?" It also exists in the human world. Si Chen realized this with a cold, terrifying clarity. Gong Chang just laughed, a twisted grin on his face as he decided they hadn't had enough fun yet. "Let's go till let's mess with him some more," he commanded, relishing the thought of further torment. Back in the present, Gong Chang looked down at them with a sense of entitlement that bordered on the divine. You guys knew I was playing ball here. Why didn't you know to bring 2 crates of drinks? To him, their only purpose was to serve his every whim. Ma Long immediately bowed his head, his instinct for survival taking over. Sorry, I'll go buy them right away. He stammered, his body practically vibrating with the urge to escape the confrontation. He was already turning to run, ready to do whatever it took to avoid a fight. Death. But Si Chen didn't move. He stood his ground, his voice cutting through Ma Long's panic like a blade. You're not the one in the wrong, he said firmly, his eyes fixed on the bullies. The ones who should say sorry are them. The words hung in the air, a direct challenge that no one expected. Gong Chang's eyes widened in genuine disbelief. He uttered, his brain momentarily failing to process the defiance. No one talked back to him, no one looked him in the eye like that. The silence that followed was heavy with impending violence. Ma Long spun around, his face pale with terror. Si Chen, what are you saying? He whispered frantically. He couldn't understand where this sudden bravado was coming from, and he was terrified of the consequences it would bring. Gong Chang stood up, his body surging with errank power. Green flames flickered around his arms as they transformed into jagged, stone-like gauntlets. A holographic window identified him. Gong Chng, errank flower warrior. He stepped forward, the heavy thud of his boots echoing on the pavement as he prepared to crush the boy who dared to defy him. Si Chen's eyes flared with a brilliant predatory crimson, a cold light that the oblivious onlookers would never suspect. He didn't see a terrifying E-rank warrior, he saw a clumsy target. The experience of 1,000 battles surged through his veins, transforming his stillness into a lethal focus. The game of predator and prey was about to be flipped on its head, right in the center of the campus square. He analyzed the situation with the cold efficiency of a master assassin, even as the first whispers of a crowd began to gather. Inside his mind, he thought, this guy named Gong Chang only dares to bully the weak because his older brother is the strongest student council president. As the glowing stone arm swung toward him, Si Chen reached a grim conclusion. In reality, his own abilities aren't outstanding. He was already 3 steps ahead of the bully, and the public spectacle that was about to unfold. Students nearby began to notice the unfolding confrontation, their faces twisting with a mix of excitement and malicious glee. One student whispered loudly to his friends, "Look over there, Gong Chang is going to beat them up again." It was clear that this was a frequent and expected spectacle in the school's hierarchy of power. The crowd's mockery intensified as Gong Chang loomed over Si Chen, and Ma Long hateful laughter erupted as one student jeered, "Haha, didn't they just get beaten into the hospital?" The jeers continued, highlighting the pathetic status of the 2 victims. One is the weakest awakener and the other hasn't even awakened. The 2 most useless guys in the whole school. The cruelty of the student body was as sharp as any blade. Gong Chang looked down at Si Chen, his body radiating a sickly green aura. He was a mountain of muscle compared to the slender boy standing before him, and he knew it. He didn't just want to fight, he wanted to humiliate. Gong Chang's face contorted with a predatory smirk as he leaned in closer. "What did you just say?" he hissed, his voice like a coiled serpent ready to strike. He couldn't believe the audacity of the boy who had previously been his punching bag. Si Chen's eyes glowed with a faint lethal crimson. He met Gong Chang's gaze without a hint of fear, his voice cold and unwavering. "Don't come bother us again." It wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum delivered by a man who had seen the end of the world. That was all the provocation Gong Chang needed. He lunged forward with a roar, his fist traveling through the air with enough force to shatter bone. "I think you really need another beating," he screamed, expecting the familiar sound of crunching ribs and a satisfying cry of pain. But the sound that rang out was a sharp metallic crack. To everyone's absolute shock, Si Chen had raised a single hand and caught the massive stone-clad fist. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, but Si Chen didn't move an inch. He had blocked the strike with effortless grace. Gong Chang froze, his momentum completely halted. He stared down at his fist, then up at Si Chen's impassive face. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He could feel the raw power vibrating through Si Chen's palm, a strength that shouldn't belong to an unawakened weakling. The crowd went silent for a heartbeat before erupting in a wave of disbelief. One girl gasped her hand to her mouth just now. What happened? Others whispered in a frenzy, their previous mockery replaced by genuine confusion. He could actually block Gong Chang's fist. It was a feat that shattered their understanding of the school's power ranking. Si Chen stood calmly, the red tint in his eyes growing more intense. The students nearby were reeling, but he clearly hasn't awakened. One thought, his mind racing to find an explanation. Did my F***-seeking eyes deceive me? Even Ma Long, standing just a few feet away, stared at his friend as if he were seeing a complete stranger. Gong Chang's shock quickly turned into a boiling, humiliated rage. He pulled his fist back, his entire body trembling with the effort of summoning more power. You damn unawakened weakling, dare to challenge me? He spat, his pride wounded more than his body. He was an E-rank awakener. He wouldn't be embarrassed by a nobody. Sichan simply smirked, a dangerous glint in his eyes, just right. I'll test it out on you, he whispered. A holographic window appeared before his eyes, its blue light reflecting in his pupils. Inside his mind, the system responded, loading, job switching. He was about to show them what a true apex predator looked like. The loading bar reached its end in a flash of light. A digital chime echoed in Sichan's ears as the message appeared. Job switch complete, finished. The air around him began to crackle with latent energy, the scent of ozone filling the space between the two fighters. A detailed status card materialized in the air, displaying his new identity. LV-1 Electric Assassin. Yellow bolts of lightning began to dance across his skin, arcing between his fingers. His stats were revealed, low strength and stamina, but a staggering amount of speed and neural power. The flash body skill increased his movement speed by 10 times, turning him into a living blur of electricity. Ma Long stumbled back, his eyes wide behind his cracked glasses. He could barely find the words to speak. Why you, when did you awaken? He shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. He had known Sichan for years, but the man standing before him now was radiating a power that was utterly alien. Sichan ignored the questions, his focus entirely on the bully. He stood as the center of a storm, the yellow lightning illuminating his determined expression. He was no longer a victim, he was the electric assassin, and the hunt had officially begun. Seeing the lightning, Gong Chang realized he couldn't hold back anymore. He unleashed his ultimate defense, his skin turning into jagged dark stone as the air around him heated up. Indestructible demon armor flashed in the air, his body expanded, his stone gauntlets growing larger and sharper as he prepared for a final decisive strike. Gong Chang roared as he threw his entire weight into a massive overhead punch. I think UF**-seeking forgot the taste of my killer jab. He screamed, the ground beneath his feet cracking from the sheer force of his movement. He was a juggernaut of stone and fury, determined to erase Sichan from existence. But Sichan was faster. He moved before Gong Chang's fist could even begin its descent. A trail of yellow lightning followed him as he bypassed the massive stone arm, his movements too fluid and rapid for the human eye to track. He was a bolt of lightning passing through a mountain. The impact was devastating. Sichan's fist, reinforced with condensed electricity, slammed into Gong Chang's face. The indestructible demon armor shattered like glass under the pressure. A brilliant explosion of yellow light engulfed the two of them as the force of the blow rippled through Gong Chang's entire body. Gong Chang was sent hurtling backward, his massive frame tumbling through the air like a rag doll. A spray of blood arched through the sky as he crashed onto the concrete steps, the impact leaving a small crater. The powerful bully who had terrorized the school was broken in a single instant. The entire courtyard was stunned into absolute silence. A few students stood with their mouths hanging open, their eyes wide with terror. One screamed in disbelief, what happened in that instant just now? Another shouted he sent Gong Chang flying with one punch. The impossible had happened right before their eyes. Ma Long stared at the crater where Gong Chang lay, his jaw practically hitting the floor. The shock was so great that he couldn't even move. He looked back at Sichan, who was calmly shaking the excess electricity from his hand, and felt a cold shiver run down his spine. This was a new world and Sichan was its master. Gong Chang groaned as he tried to push himself up, blood dripping from his shattered jaw. Is this really Sichan? He thought, his mind reeling as he looked up at the silhouette surrounded by lightning. What on earth is going on? The pain was immense, but the humiliation was worse. He spat out a mouthful of blood and cursed, FCK, your grandfather. Dare to sneak attack me? Even in defeat, his ego wouldn't allow him to admit he had been outclassed. Gong Chang glared at his friends who were standing frozen in the distance. Are you FCKers just going to stand there and watch? He roared, his voice thick with rage and desperation. He couldn't believe his own lackeys were so useless when he needed them most. The dynamic of the school had shifted and everyone was beginning to realize it. The crony wheezed, sweat drenching his face as he stared up at the boy he had once deemed nothing but scum. His jaw twitched, yet only disjointed syllables tumbled out. But, he stuttered, eyes bulging with a horror that eclipsed mere physical agony. The absolute impossibility of it all began to shatter his mind. Si-Chen stood as a dark silhouette against the blinding afternoon light, his body wreathed in violent arcs of yellow electricity. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was a storm personified, a predator who had finally revealed his claws. The air around him hummed with lethal energy, vibrating with a silent promise of destruction. Humiliation flared into a desperate, murderous rage in Gong Cheng's eyes. He lunged forward, his stone-clad fist raised for a final, crushing blow. I'll kill you, he screamed, his voice raw with the agony of his pride being torn apart. He threw everything he had into the strike, a frantic attempt to reclaim his status through brute force. The massive stone arm came crashing down, but Si-Chen moved with a speed that defied logic. He raised his single arm, catching the colossal strike with a resounding crack of lightning. The impact didn't even push him back. He held the brute's power in his palm as if it were nothing more than a child's toy. With a fluid shift in momentum, Si-Chen drove his fist into Gong Cheng's gut, the strike carrying the weight of a thunderbolt. The bully choked out, his eyes bulging as the wind was ripped from his lungs. Si-Chen's gaze was ice as he muttered a single, damning word, you. Si-Chen leaned in, his face illuminated by the dancing lightning as he delivered the final verdict, are too weak. The words were a death knell for Gong Cheng's ego, a cold assessment from a warrior who had fought gods. There was no pity in his eyes, only the clinical detachment of a master executioner. A massive eruption of yellow energy exploded outward as Si-Chen released his full power. The shockwave tore through the basketball court, the blinding light swallowing both combatants for a terrifying heartbeat. The sheer force of the electric assassin's strike was enough to shake the very foundations of the school. Gong Cheng was sent hurtling through the air like a ragdoll caught in a hurricane. His massive frame tumbled uselessly across the pavement, the lightning still arcing across his skin. He was a broken man, defeated in a single overwhelming display of power by the person he had once laughed at. The view from above revealed the true scale of the devastation. Kungdan had been flung straight into the spectator stands, setting up a blinding cloud of dust. He lay motionless in the distance, a tiny wretched figure in the wake of Tooth's true awakening. Gong Cheng slumped against the base of the concrete bleachers, his blood staining the gray stone. His tattered shirt and broken gauntlets were a pathetic reminder of his failed indestructible demon armor. He was barely conscious, his breathing shallow and ragged as the reality of his defeat finally set in. The entire area fell into a stunned silence. Students stood paralyzed, their faces pale with shock. Ma Long remained on his knees in the grass, his mind unable to process the violence he had just witnessed. In the center of the wreckage, Si-Chen stood calm and unmoved, a predator who had just finished a minor hunt. Ma Long stared at his friend through his cracked glasses, his hands trembling. Si-Chen he? When did he? He whispered to himself, his voice shaking with a mix of awe and terror. He had spent his life trying to protect his friend, only to realize that the person standing there was someone he no longer recognized. Si-Chen looked down at his blood-stained knuckles, his expression unreadable. Around him, the whispers of the crowd began to swell into a frantic roar. One question seemed to be on everyone's lips, how could he become so strong? The world they knew had been turned upside down in a matter of seconds. A translucent screen hovered before Si-Chen's eyes, displaying his level 1 stats, everything at a flat 100. He stared at the numbers with a cold analytical mind. I've reached a few rough conclusions now, he thought. The system was functioning perfectly, but it was only the beginning of his journey. Arcs of electricity continued to dance over his skin as he calculated his next move. 1. Just like before, I can switch to the electric assassin state at any time. 2. Although the system level is currently LV1, he noted. He was testing the limits of his regression, finding the familiar patterns in this new life. He looked back at the impact of the block he had made earlier, the image burned into his mind. Just as I expected, my daily state is enough to deal with the lowest level awakeners. This means my current grade is higher than E, he concluded. His experience as an SSS rank assassin was making up for his lack of raw levels. Si-Chen's gaze narrowed, his crimson eyes reflecting a hidden darkness. But exactly what grade is still unclear, he thought. Despite the victory, a nagging suspicion remained. But there is one more problem, he realized, looking away from the broken body of his opponent. The math didn't add up. He stared at the unmoving Gong Cheng, then back at his own level 1 status window. I clearly defeated him. Why hasn't there been any change in the system stats, he questioned. In his past life, every kill, every victory brought immediate growth. This silence from the system was an anomaly he couldn't ignore. He flexed his hand, the lightning intensifying into a brilliant golden blade. Could it be, he thought, a grim realization dawning on him? Perhaps the system required more than just a defeat to progress. He looked toward his fallen foe with a new, much more lethal intent. The crowd saw the change in his posture and began to panic. Malone scrambled to his feet, screaming at the top of his lungs. Hey, wait, Chen, what are you going to do? The raw bloodlust radiating from Chen was so thick it was almost physical, terrifying everyone in the vicinity. Chen grabbed Gongchang by the throat, hoisting the massive brute up as if he weighed nothing. The bully's face was a mask of sheer agony and confusion as he looked into the cold eyes of his executioner. Chen's grip was like iron, crackling with lethal energy that pulsed through his victim's body. A question echoed in Chen's mind as he tightened his grip, the red in his eyes glowing with a terrifying intensity. Is the way to gain experience also the same as in the past? He was ready to find out the hard way, his past as a ruthless killer overriding any student morality. Experience points were paid for in blood. He prepared to deliver the final strike, the lightning in his hand condensing into a white-hot point of death. The air around them screamed with the force of the build-up. Gongchang's eyes rolled back in his head, his life hanging by a thread as Chen prepared to devour his power. The air hummed with lethal intent, but a melodic voice suddenly sliced through the scent of ozone like a silver bell. Fellow student, this is a school. You know, Tilda, the interruption was so jarring that Chen's lightning flickered and died. Stepping into the light was a woman whose elegant presence stood in stark contrast to the wreckage and violence of the court.